end up there. Go away. All right, everybody, thank you for coming today. As always, if you want to connect with us, we post a lot of our stuff on Meetup, Twitter, YouTube. And if you have any questions or want to reach out to any of us, here's all of the organizers' emails. Today, the first, we will be presenting on a Teams plugin. And the next meeting will be on machine learning. If you want to learn any more about Azure, here's some free resources out there for you. And feel free to join our Slack if you have any questions, comments, feedback, any of that. And this meeting will be sponsored by Sogeti today. I will hand that over to you, Matt, on that.
Sure, thanks, Alec. So looks like many of you on the call already know what Sogeti is about, but I'll go through it again. Sogeti is the technology and engineering division arm of the larger company Capgemini. Sogeti's part of our strategy is to have a global reach with local touch, and we have offices headquartered in 35 cities across the United States, and then we're in 38 countries around the world, and we specialize in cloud and software engineering, partners with both most of the cloud providers, including Microsoft. We specialize in insights and data and AI, experience and innovation, UI UX, and then we also have what we call Sogeti Labs, which is a think tank where we try to provide thought leadership and research into new and emerging technologies and provide point of view and position and try to get ahead of the market and stay cutting edge on what's next and have a relevant message for that. So we have offices in Des Moines, Iowa, and Omaha, Nebraska. That's this local region. And of course, we hire software engineers, software developers, data experts, AI experts, UI UX, and pretty much anything you can think of in information technology and IT industry. We're probably hiring for that. Two of our leaders in the company, Brandon Sharp and Clinton, are going to be doing the presentation today, and on Microsoft Teams plugins as it relates to Azure, so building out a plugin with an Azure backend. And we'll be giving away a little prize at the end to whoever's left. So that's all I had. Alec, back to you.
Sure, I will hand it over to the speakers, whichever, if one of you guys want to share your screen or kick it off.
Yep, I'll jump on it. Thanks for the introduction, Matt.
Yep.
So what we're going to kind of talk over today is kind of setting up one of the team custom apps, different things like that. Kind of how we architected it a little bit, but this will all be at a high level. I don't think we'll take the full hour, but we'll be around to answer any type of questions or anything like that, or any type of discussion that this drums up. So to kick it off, here's the outline. Where we'll first kind of talk about what is MOB, or what we like to refer to as team programming. What is Project Planeteer? Why go down the path of creating a Microsoft Teams extension? And then how do you create a custom team app? So here's just kind of a list of the team that has had some type of input or thought leadership involved in this project as we move forward. Ian Durston, Matt, of course, Clinton, Avery, Julian Pfeffer, Corey Gideon, Robert Duvall, Eric Ruelas, myself, and Nick Nally. Now, a couple of these individuals have moved on since then, since we initiated this project, but and there might be some that's not on this list that have kind of popped in and have done some work. But this was kind of the core team when we initiated this presentation that was involved in it. So what is MOB or team programming? So team program was kind of a software development concept where the whole team works on the same thing. So if you're trying to overcome, I've heard this referred to as swarming also. But if you're trying to overcome a problem or you're trying to resolve a feature or a task that you're working on, more heads are always better than none. However, bringing more developers in sometimes offers some challenges that you have to overcome. The original concept was developed by a gentleman named Woody, and I'm gonna butcher his name, Zuil. And basically, the whole team collaborates on the development of a piece of an application or the application. There's a lot of advantages to this type of approach. Team building, team learns to work together. It's just is you can overcome a lot of these hurdles a lot quicker than if you're just kind of off in your own silo trying to figure it out yourself and searching through Google. You usually have a what they would refer to as a driver and a navigator, or we like to call it an instigator. So you have one person that's actually working behind the keyboard, and then you have one person that is kind of taking input from the team, doing Google searches, doing different things like that, trying to help the driver out. And at the same time reviewing what the driver's doing so that the driver is getting input from everybody as they move forward. Some of the challenges here, especially as we move to remote, is sharing one computer when working remotely, and geographically dispersed, those types of issues. Communicating handoff, usually is set to a timer or something, but how you keeping that communication back and forth. Also, depending on the size of your team, keeping everybody engaged in what the driver is doing, what he's working on, so that when it becomes their turn, they're not, they're in tune to what's happening. They're not trying to play catch up. So as we are first kind of onboarding onto the client that we're working with, this was one of the big things that they did. They had the teams all in one meeting, what they would refer to as an accelerator, and we were going through and working through these tasks as a team together. And that's where we kind of went through tried to use a couple of different applications. I know Microsoft has the tip of the tongue syndrome. I can't think of the name of it. If somebody can jump in, if you're working in videos, what's that? Live share. Yeah. Yep. Live share. So we use live share for a little bit. There's some challenges there. One, when we were using it, there was a limit on the number of users. I don't know if that's still true or not, but I know There was a limit on that. One of the other issues that we ran into was you would set one user up, and you basically you're using their machine, uh, but then that one user would have all the permissions needed to execute the software and work on the software, but then the next user might not have to do that. So you're constantly having to try to configure permissions for whichever user was actually uh, initiating the live share. Um, so that kind of leads into the why we kind of started going into what this project was about and why we chose Microsoft Teams. So Clinton Avery, our resident genius, he he said, "Wouldn't it be nice if you could institute this type of collaboration just within Teams itself, right? You can share screens in Teams, you could chat in Teams, you could just uh, communicate via the microphones, speakers, those types of things. So you kind of had everything built into Teams that you needed for this type of collaborations, but they was missing a couple of parts, right? You didn't have a timer that you could set. You didn't have a way to organize users to allow them to be the driver, the instigator, those types of things. So the concept was born, right, of what Project Planner tier was going to be. Basically, it was going to be like, if anybody's familiar with the Mobster app, it was going to be a Mobster built within the Teams uh, application. So we started kind of going down that path. And I know there's a lot of other communications tools that you could use, Slack or Zoom or other things, and but we decided to go down the path of Microsoft Teams because of just the growth that Teams has been experiencing over the past year and a half. Uh, they have grown substantially since COVID. They were growing prior to that, but they have truly increased the number of users that are currently using Teams. So we kind of and it was also kind of the norm of what we used as Sogeti and both at the client. So I'll kind of take a break there and see if there's any questions or if Clinton wants to add anything to it.
Oh no, the only thing that I'd add to that, Brandon, was just the one number of 145 million daily active users reported for Teams. That's like a massive number.
Yeah.
You don't really need to make the case beyond that.
Yeah, and I think that it had pretty much doubled from the previous, or at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. It had pretty much almost doubled throughout the year of 2020. So,
Yeah, and I'll just I'll just add a few things. I think so. The necessity is the mother of invention, and when COVID happened, it kind of threw a kink in our plan of co-locating in the same room, and sharing the TV screens or big monitor or whatever that might be, so that the team can do this mob programming and pair programming together in a highly productive, efficient way. And when everybody started, when the COVID hit and work from home became a thing, and everybody's geographically distributed, and you have disparate different types of internet connections, doing those tools were not designed or built with that in mind. They were even Microsoft Live Share in Visual Studio. It was kind of designed to be low latency, high throughput type network connection, assuming you're probably in the same office or on the same network. But that's not the case now, right? So that's what drove the need for something different, and that's how this kind of this idea sparked. Anyway, sorry, Clinton, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody's developed with LiveShare. It can be rough to keep track of too, because you literally have whoever you've invited into the LiveShare, and people can click on something different, and it'll take you away from what you're working on, different things like that. A lot of things kind of, it's just a little different to work with, because it's literally, if you have 5 people in a session, it is 5 people that are touching code, and you might be writing a line of code and somebody accidentally click on somewhere further down the code file, and next thing you know, your half your statement's written at a different line than what you intended it to. So there's some challenges there, and I know Microsoft's actively working on different things, because I know Visual Studio Code has a lot of advancements in this area of LiveShare and different things like that too. That was just kind of our experience.
And so some of you might be wondering, what's the point of Azure here? Where's the connection? Well, I'll let you guys are going to get to the point of this.
Right.
But Teams is the tool that we're all using every day, that we're collaborating on. Why not use it as much as we can for our development tasks, for our team tasks, for the things that we're doing to collaborate with the team, whether it's mob programming or pair programming, or even checking in code and doing pull requests, right? So that's where the connection starts to Teams, and then Azure comes into play here pretty soon.
Yep. Well, it's actually the next slide.
Oh.
So this is where Azure comes into play, right? So we gotta be able to host something somewhere, right? So the Microsoft custom applications are basically just a lightweight website that is presented from some type of frame. I don't want to call it an iframe, but it's basically that type of concept. So we used the serverless architecture that Matt had put together before, and I'm not sure if he presented to this group or not, but we kind of use that same type of concept where we have a static website hosted in Azure, Azure HTTP functions. We're using the single R services within Azure, and that's all being served from instead of a database, we have data tables in the Azure storage accounts. So that's kind of the high level architecture of Planeteer, and that's where we get embedded into Azure deeply here. Now we went with as cheap as possible on this. We then move forward with Cosmos. We just used the table, which Cosmos will probably be our next conversion. But as we're in kind of the POC mode, we just went with table storage initially. Clinton, did you want to talk to any of that?
If you want to hand it off to me, I can go into. I'm not sure what the next slide is, Brandon. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah. So the next slide is the diagram.
Okay.
Of how it flows. Everything flows within the application. So if you want to speak to that.
Sure. Yep. Actually, can you go back one? Or
Yep.
better yet, I can just show my screen here and just, so
Okay.
that's, so I like this diagram. This is showing a great overview of how it connects in with the Azure stuff. So we've got all of our users, of course, they're on Teams, and then Teams is connecting to Azure. All this stuff is in Azure. So how do you get Teams to connect to Azure? So there was just a couple of interesting things that I wanted to share with the group that I thought were cool that I learned in doing this whole project. So I wanted to show you guys how to make Teams connect to, I mean, essentially how to make it a custom app, how to make Teams use a custom app. So I want to show how Teams manifest works to do that. It's pretty simple. And then I wanted to show how we're using, I thought SignalR was pretty cool in Azure. And it turned out, it was surprising to me how straightforward it was to set up a Azure function and then the SignalR service. It turned out not to be terribly difficult. So I think we have time to go through that. It won't take very long. I just wanted to show a few of those things to give the group kind of an idea of, I mean, I wanted it to be focused on Azure, but also this is a significant portion, like how do you actually connect Teams to use an app that's hosted in Azure. So if that's cool, that's what I'll show. And I'm wondering if I could send the app manifest to the host of this meeting and have them add it to the meeting. Maybe not, but I don't think I have permission to add a custom app to this meeting for like an actual demonstration. But at any rate, so what the first thing that I want to show is this Teams manifest. And
If you can, Clinton, just go ahead and send it to
just in the chat.
send it to put it in the chat, Alec, or actually
Yeah.
I can try it.
So
I doubt I have permissions,
okay.
but Derek might, or Alec.
It doesn't appear to be letting me copy things to the chat. Am I?
I think Derek is the owner.
Okay. All right, Derek, is it okay if I just send you an email to your
Yeah, go ahead.
D#? Okay, I'll do that really quick.
If it works, it works. If not, keep going.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that. So let me just walk through. Actually, let me just show a demonstration. So I have a recording. So I prepared for this possibility. So if we have, this is a recording of a Teams meeting that me and Brandon and Julian did. And so you can see up here in the upper right, there's an additional icon in there. So that's the icon that we're using. And then there's a side panel that pops open here. So you click your icon. Once you've successfully added it to your meeting, then you get this new icon, and then you'll get a side panel that pops open. And here's what we were working with, sort of doing our proof of concept. So that's just demonstrating what we're moving towards, is having a meeting with a side panel that displays dynamic content over there. So how do we get that to work?
Maybe it's, I'm sorry to interrupt, maybe it's just me, but I'm not seeing anything except the diagram.
Sorry about that. Was that true
Oh,
for
yeah.
everybody?
Yeah, I was seeing it.
The movie?
Yeah, I saw the recording.
Maybe
Okay.
leave it up a little longer. Maybe
Okay.
your connection's slow. I don't know.
Certainly could be. How's that? I have a video window open.
I can't see, but that's okay. Go
Okay,
ahead.
sorry about that, Sherry. So anyway, so to get that to show up in a Teams window, you need to tell Teams that there's an application out there that you want to connect to, and it's pretty simple to do that. You create this manifest JSON file, and it contains all the relevant information. So the big part here is setting up a configuration URL. So we have a static site out there that's hosted, and this URL points to it. And then that URL, once it loads, when you first add the custom app to Teams, it configures Teams and points it to your web application. So you can see here, this defines where that application will show up. So there's different contexts. Of course, we'd want it in the meeting for our sake. So that would be a team scope. And then the context here, that's pretty much all that there is to that. So in order to create this Teams or this manifest to show Teams how to connect to your web app, Teams actually has a built-in application to assist with that. So I was using this thing called App Studio in here. And if you just go down to apps and search for it, it comes up. And then all you have to do is go to create a new app here. And most of this stuff I just ignored. So I was trying to add a new tab to Teams. So I went in here and added a Teams tab, and you can specify the URL, and then you want it in a meeting and you want it to be a side panel. So this is basically all that I did. Doesn't matter. And then once you've set those settings, you can go down to your app manifest preview and then just pull this stuff out. And that pretty much matches everything that I have in here. So it gives you the configuration URL and the context and the scopes and all that. So App Studio helps out with building those manifests that get used. And then to add the app, it's essentially zipping up that manifest and then coming back here to the app section of Teams, go to upload a custom app, and then you just grab your zip file. So in addition, in the zip file, it contains your JSON file that shows the app manifest, and then it also just has the icons. And that's it. That's the zip. And you open it, and then so in this case, I don't have permissions to add it beyond a team, but if you do have those permissions, then here it will tell you, it'll compare the permissions that you have with the permissions specified in the manifest, the JSON file, and it'll display whatever contexts you can add it to here. So if we add it to a team, then like in my case, so I have a few teams that are available to me. I could add these as a tab in there. Actually, I wonder if I could just add it to mine. I wonder if that would work.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
If you build something out like this, so you can do it on a team level. I'm not super familiar with Teams. Can you do that as like an administrative, like anybody under our organization level?
So whoever has access to the Teams administrator interface, which there's a URL, teamsadministrator.microsoft.com, something like that, to configure Teams. Whoever has access to that can extend access to the organization or to groups within the organization so that they have the ability to add custom apps, these side panel custom apps. Was that your question? Did I answer that?
Yeah, I think so. That way anybody else can add it or have it already pre-added, so you don't have to have everybody find it. It can already just be there.
Yeah, you have to be an administrator of the team's organization, I believe, in order to be able to add it.
Okay, cool.
Or having been extended the permission from the administrator. I think the administrator can give anybody that ability, I think.
Which, good luck with that.
I don't have the ability. But yeah, most organizations that use Teams, there's on the panel to the left-hand side, there's an app. If you click on or down low, Clinton, on the left-hand side, if you click on apps,
Okay.
you click there, you'll see that a lot of times they'll have applications that they have already set aside for your organization. And that's what they would have to do, is they would have to bundle this up and set it into that placeholder for it. So you kind of see right there in the middle of the list on the left-hand side, built for your organization or your org. You would see it within there, so that at that point in time, anybody within your organization could add that. So we're kind of doing it from the custom side, so like the developer's perspective of it. We haven't. That's one of our next step is to see how do we get, who do we talk to within the Capgemini organization to add this application into that section.
So you'll be talking to CUNA to see if they can do that too.
Yeah, we use our contacts within CUNA, so that'll be you, Brian. We'll see if you if you can pull some strings for us and get that. But seriously, yeah, once so we're at the proof of concept phase. We've got kind of the scaffolding built for the application that we have now. And once it gets to the minimum viable product stage, that would be high on the list of things that we do is work with the clients that we have contracts with, because it would have been a big help during the accelerator for sure to have that functionality handled automatically instead of having to use some third-party application, go to a different website. And if it was all integrated, that would have smoothed things, reduced a lot of the friction of our accelerator.
But we have some hurdles to jump before we get there, such as right now this completely being hosted in MSDN subscription. So
I
before
was
we
gonna say,
get,
are you using personal Teams instances for your development?
Yeah,
Or do you have enough power in your Capgemini instance that you don't have to worry about that?
I have I think it's called a Microsoft E5 developer subscription, if I recall correctly. I think the E5 developer subscription lets you develop for all Microsoft like Office applications, including Teams. And then, so yeah, on my personal dev machine, I have a Teams instance and all that stuff. That's how I'm doing the development. And I have all the power in that environment. And it goes to my head. Any other questions before I move on with just showing a couple of the cool things?
Maybe you're going to do this, but talk about the languages, the programming languages, and the tech stack that you're using to deploy.
Okay. Yeah, I'll use the diagram here to show that. So we have a this is an Azure storage account, and we're hosting our front end in there. So that is a React application in there. So TypeScript in the React framework. And then in our Azure functions, that's all C#. That's it. In terms of the languages that we have, we're using HTML technically, and JavaScript, TypeScript, React, and C#.
And that static web hosting app that's written in React on Azure, you can just pull that up independent of Teams too, right? I mean, it's not necessarily tied to Teams. So any React or any website for that matter, as long as it's a static site like React or Angular or something like that, could just be pulled into that Teams panel on the side. Is that true?
That's right. Yeah. So you just have you would need to set up a configuration URL at your site, which then does some initialization, does some special communication with Teams, telling Teams how to connect to the website and how that'll get displayed. So there's a little bit going on there, but essentially you could take any website and stick it in a side panel using a manifest, provided that you wrote some sort of a configuration URL to initialize the website in Teams.
So Teams has to be aware of that site first, so that there's that sort of a security check there first.
Yep. And it's not just the manifest. Like you can't point Teams directly at a website. Teams initially has to be pointed at a configuration URL, and then that. I wonder if I could show the code for that. But anyway, it initializes Teams to connect to the web app, and then that's how. So there's no direct connection from the manifest to the website. It's sort of a two-step process. Use the manifest. Manifest points at the configuration URL. The configuration URL tells Teams how to connect to the website that you want to display in your side panel.
Got it. Yeah. So basically, anything you can do in React and Angular, or a static or a SPA type web app, you can pull into that side panel.
Yep. And if it's set up to be a responsive web app, it would show up in there. Like the dimensions of the side panel are essentially the same as on an iPhone. So if your website is optimized to display in an iPhone, it'll look okay in the side panel of Teams, which is kind of cool.
Nice. So
I'll just springboard to the rest of these items, these big items, these components here. So we really leveraged the account storage pretty hard because it's pretty versatile and we like that a lot. So I guess it's kind of a serverless approach. So we're using Azure storage account for both the web hosting and for the Azure table storage to monitor the session and all of that. So a lot of the work is being done inside of one Azure storage account, and then the rest of it's happening inside of an Azure function. So I think I'll just show you some things that I thought were cool. So before I show you the Azure function and the SignalR, I just wanted to show how to deploy a static client. So if you to the Azure account storage account, and the way that we're doing it here was in Azure DevOps, just using an Azure CLI task and then running PowerShell and an inline script. And then this command here will clear out the storage account in the web. If you have it set up for static web hosting, then there's a folder in there, the cache web folder. So every time we're deploying here, we're clearing out that cache web folder, and then we are uploading from our build location in Azure DevOps down here, we're uploading that new content to the same folder. So this was cool because I didn't know how to do it, and it's not a very common thing that's out there. But now once it's there, it's like, okay, that works really well. So if anyone needs to know how to do this stuff, we've got a good solid example of deploying a front end to a Azure storage account. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then let me just quickly show the SignalR thing. So in Azure, we have our timer control Azure function, and then we have SignalR as a service. So you guys probably know SignalR is like some kind of a first-class citizen in Azure. So all you have to do is create a new resource, and then it will have a connection setting to it. I don't want to show the wrong thing here, but okay. So in the keys, so there's a connection string in there. And so once you create your SignalR service, you go into keys, you grab that connection string, then you go back to your function app. So this is the Azure function app. And all you have to do is go into your configuration settings, and you just add a new application setting and add your line item there for the Azure SignalR connection string, and then paste in to this spot here, that thing that I didn't show you from the other screen. And that's it. So Azure makes it pretty easy to integrate SignalR into your function apps. And I thought that was really cool. So when in that video that I showed where Julian and Brandon and I were all looking at the same screen, the timer is synchronized across all members of the session. So that was one thing that I really just wanted to make sure to highlight, was the ease of adding SignalR, at least from a configuration standpoint, to an Azure function. And that might conclude all of the things that I wanted to share. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? Feel uncomfortable showing that for too long because I'm not sure if there's anything I don't want to see. But although it's recorded, I don't think there's anything sensitive on there.
You can always rotate those keys if we did see them.
That's true.
Um,
There's
which-
nothing super
which
secret
you
in there.
should be doing that anyway, right? Every 24 hours.
At least every 24 hours.
So the Signal R, this is not a .NET users group. This is an Azure user group. But just because I'm curious, how does that work with the SPA? How does that hook in to the React front end?
In the React, so you're going to import it. A lot of it's just packages. So in React, there's a Microsoft Signal R package that you can bring into your React project. So you do npm install on, I think it's just Microsoft Signal R, and then that'll get it into the project. There's good documentation online on how to add Signal R to React, which is basically what I followed. You do a use effect that will run every time your page reloads, and it will establish a connection to the Signal R hub. And so it's actually at that point, it's connecting from the React front end to the function app. So in the function, I wonder if I just could show the code and that might help.
So the function triggers, talks to Signal R sends it back to the React, has a listener or a callback ready to handle it. Is that true?
Yep. So here's the function URL that I'm specifying here. And then I have a use effect here, and it starts the connection. This gets run every time the connection changes. So it's doing, let's see, a post. I don't believe it's doing a post actually. Oh, it's right here. So it creates the connection here. So this hub connection builder is inside of the Microsoft Signal R package that you need to import into your project. So you set this up and you specify your function URL. So this function URL is pointing at my timer control Azure function. And then inside of there, I wonder if it has a negotiate endpoint in the function. And this is boilerplate stuff. So if you're adding Signal R to a function app, I believe that's even a template that you can do. It'll just come up with this. And then it returns, so the work of broadcasting out is this Signal R message dot add async, and you put in your Signal R message, and it'll tell it where it's going to broadcast. So then on the front end, it needs to recognize what to do when it gets one of these. And that's basically how that's kind of floating through there. Not a great explanation, Matt. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I grasped the concept. It's probably a different presentation on that anyway.
Yeah, I'm certainly no expert on Signal R, and I was just pleased with how easy it was to, in Azure, create the Signal R service and then connect it to the function app. The configurations weren't very difficult at all to get that going. So that was a pleasant surprise, which is kind of what you want. Then I can focus on other items elsewhere. Just the Signal R thing, I know that's taken care of.
Yeah, we've kind of had those discussions about building out and that's where the diagram that Clinton artistically drew.
Yeah, I like that. That was nice.
That was kind of, yeah. and that was kind of started trying to draw out some of that communication around the SignalR and stuff like that. But I do think that's a completely different possible presentation. So, and then I can pick up. So the last slide I had is just more just communication around what's next.
Yeah, you want to grab the screen back?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So kind of what's next for the project. We're continually move forward with design and coming up with the full list of features that we want to show on it. We're working forward with that, and then we have to try to resolve some of the issues with where's going to be the final resting place for it. Kind of is there somewhere we can place it in Capgemini's architecture environment or whatever that we could possibly start delivering this as a product versus right now a POC. We're still having some of those communications and those discussions. So like to Brian's point, we could, where we could present this to a client and say, hey, this is something we've tried. What do you think about using it or whatever? Have those communications. Possibly switch over to Cosmos DB. Again, we're just using table storage right now in the Azure storage client, just because as a POC, we just don't need some of the benefit that Cosmos DB brings. And the potential for cost of Cosmos DB until we get everything worked out, make sure it's running efficiently. So that's kind of our next step. Clinton, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I hope everybody. Yeah, thanks everybody for listening and everything. And the Teams manifest is pretty easy to make. Azure services are pretty easy to connect to function apps, and there's a good way to deploy a front end to an Azure storage account using Azure CLI. So hopefully those will come in handy for everybody, or at least everyone finds that a little bit interesting.
All right. Well, with that, that's the end of our presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Comments?
Thanks for sharing, guys.
It actually took a little bit longer than I thought, but it's all good material.
I can go ahead and stop the recording if anybody wants to ask questions off recording.
Yeah,